Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parivrajikacharya Shtotarshat Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charanarvinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Nitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 25, Text 1. This is the glories of devotional service. We are beginning this new chapter. Shaunaka Uvacha Kapilas Tattva Sankhyaata Bhagavan Atma Mayaya Jatah Swayam Ajah Saksha Atma Pragyaptaye Nruna. Shaunakuvacha Kapilas Tattva Sankhyaata Bhagavan Atma Mayaya Jatah Swayam Ajah Saksha Atma Pragyaptaye Nruna. Shaunakuvacha Kapilas Tattva Sankhyaata Bhagavan Atma Mayaya Jatah Swayam Aja Saksha Atma Pragyaptaye Nrunam. Shaunaka Uvacha Kapilas Tattva Sankhyaata Vacha Kapilas Tattva Sankhyaata Bhagwan Atma Mayaya Jata Swayam Ada Sakshat Atma Pragyaptaye Nrunam. Vacha Shaunaka Uvacha. Shri Shaunaka said, Kapilaha, Lord Kapila, Tattva of the truth, Sankhyaata, the expounder, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Atma Mayaya, by his internal potency. Jataha, took birth. Swayam, himself. Ajaha, unborn. Sakshat, in person. Atma Pragyaptaye, to disseminate transcendental knowledge. Nrunam, for the human race. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada. Sri Shaunaka said, although he is unborn, the Supreme Personality of Godhead took birth as Kapila Muni by his internal potency. He descended to disseminate transcendental knowledge for the benefit of the whole human race. The word Atma Pragyaptaye indicates that the Lord descends for the benefit of the human race to give transcendental knowledge. Material necessities are quite sufficiently provided for in the Vedic knowledge, which offers a program for good living conditions and gradual elevation to the platform of goodness. In the mode of goodness, one's knowledge expands. On the platform of passion, there is no knowledge, for passion is simply an impetus to enjoy material benefits. On the platform of ignorance, there is no knowledge and no enjoyment, but simply life almost like that of animals. The Vedas are meant to elevate one from the mode of ignorance to the platform of goodness. When one is situated in the mode of goodness, he is able to understand knowledge of the self or transcendental knowledge. This knowledge cannot be appreciated by any ordinary man. Therefore, since a disciplic succession is required, this knowledge is expounded either by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself or by his bona fide devotee. Shaunaka Muni also states here that Kapila, the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, took birth or appeared simply to appreciate and disseminate transcendental knowledge. Simply to understand that one is not matter but spirit soul, Aham Brahmasmi, I am by nature Brahman, is not sufficient knowledge for understanding the self and his activities. One must be situated in the activities of Brahman. Knowledge of those activities is explained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such transcendental knowledge can be appreciated in human society, but not in animal society, indicated as clearly indicated here by the word Drunam, for the human beings. Human beings are meant for regulated life. By nature, there is regulation in animal life also. But that is not like the regulated life as described in the scriptures or by the authorities. Human life is regulated life, not animal life. In regulated life only can one understand transcendental knowledge. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. My dear Lord, please guide us all so that we can understand your message and understand your love and align our lives accordingly. Hare Krishna. I'm grateful to be here with all of you today. And when I came into the temple hall in the morning, I was reminded of a statement Srila Prabhupada made in the 1970s. Prabhupada said that this Krishna consciousness movement has come from India, but I am practically the only Indian in this movement. So, I think when I came here, I was the only Indian here also. So, although I have been traveling Australia for almost a month, in most of the programs, if I attend, I feel as if I'm still in India only. Because almost everyone there is Indian. Of course, Indian devotees are also wonderful, but it is, Prabhupada wanted that. We didn't want Prabhupada started an international society for Krishna consciousness, not an Indian society for Krishna consciousness with international branches. So I think that legacy of Prabhupada is vibrantly alive over here. And my appreciation and obeisances to all of you, members of the community and the leaders of the community, for keeping, not only keeping that legacy alive, but also demonstrating how it is possible to keep it alive. So when I come to Australia, I look forward to coming here. And today and tomorrow I'll be giving the Bhagavatam class. So I will analyze this particular subject from one perspective. That is, Prabhupada is talking about Atma Pragyaptaya, the difference between humans and animals. So I will try to analyze this in a way which we can relate with in our lives as devotees, as well as when we speak with others. How can we explain this in a more relatable way? So generally, when I give a Bhagavatam class, I write and draw and explain certain things. So I prefer to use a framework that I have summarized as Chit. Chit means consciousness. So I use it for talking about 3 points: context, what is going on in the verse, then the implication. Whatever is said there, what does it imply? What is the deeper insight in it? And the last is the takeaway. What can we learn or apply for our daily life? So I'll use this framework for today's and tomorrow's class also. Context I'll explain today, so tomorrow I won't go much into the context. So here we are in the third, so the broad topic I will be discussing is the search for meaning. That is what, in one sense, is a defining characteristic of human beings. I'll explain how. So the context here is that Lord Kapila has just spoken to his father. The Srimad Bhagavatam has how many cantos, anyone knows? 12 cantos, excellent. Anyone knows how many chapters? Yeah, it's quite a large number. There are 335 chapters in Srimad Bhagavatam, out of which is the largest canto? The 10th canto. It has 90 chapters. So now, after that, among the longest cantos are the 11th canto and the 3rd canto. So we are in the 3rd canto right now, and it is in these 2 cantos that the most philosophical discussions happen. The elaborate philosophical discussion happens the longest is in what is called as the Uddhav Gita, that is Krishna speaking to Uddhava. And now here in the 3rd canto is the section of Kapila. Now here the philosophy will come later when Kapila will speak to his mother, Devahuti. But even before, there is a philosophical discussion going on. This pastime itself goes on for a large number of chapters. If we look at the section over here, this particular pastime starts from chapter 21, where Kardama and Manu, they meet. And then Manu offers his daughter, Devahuti. They get married. And then Devahuti is serving him diligently, but she laments that I don't have a child. And then Kardamuni, it's interesting, the previous chapter is called the Renunciation of Kardamuni. So he has the Lord appearing in his family, and then he renounces the world. So that transition is going on now. Now in the subsequent chapters, when Kapila is consoling his mother Devahuti, the philosophy will be spoken. So this goes on, it's an elaborate section from chapter 25 till almost chapter 32, partly chapter 33. The 7 chapters, actually 8 chapters, there is this discussion of philosophy. So it's probably among the, after the Uddhav Gita, this is the longest, single longest philosophical discourse. So in this philosophical discourse, the prelude is given over here. So if we go into the third canto, we have from chapter 25 to chapter 32, it is going to be Kapila's instructions or Kapila's wisdom, which is called as Sankhya, that he is going to share. Prabhupada took a part of this and published it as Teachings of Lord Kapila in his book. So it's a very significant, we are starting over here, 3.25.1. That right in the beginning, see, the Bhagavatam is like a nested conversation. There are layers of conversation going on in the Bhagavatam. Right now, we are in the fourth layer nesting. I'll just quickly explain that. The fourth layer nesting means that the meta conversation between the Bhagavatam is between Suta Goswami and the sages led by Shaunaka. So that Shaunaka he spoke just now. This starts from the first canto 1.1 and goes to the 12th canto end. And the more defining conversation is between Shukadev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. And that actually starts from the second canto and goes on till 12.4 approximately. Depending on how you read it, 4 to 6, it goes on till there. How we analyze it. Now the third conversation, okay, it's not that big definitely. The third conversation, it starts on third canto from around 6-7 chapter, so 3.7 approximately. This is between Maitreya and Vidura. And within their discussion between Maitreya and Vidura, now the fourth level nesting is happening. This is going to be the conversation between Kapila and his mother, Devahuti. So that conversation is about to begin. And that is what we will be discussing now. So now, while that conversation is going to happen, the speaker, now Kapila is a well-known person in the Vedic context. Even the student here, Shaunaka, is not ignorant. He also knows certain things. Like we are having a Bhagavatam class right now. Now, later in the day, I will speak to the Krishna village people. Many of them may not even know what is the Bhagavatam. So, all of you know what is the Bhagavatam. You dedicated your life to understanding and living the Bhagavatam. So, you are in one sense insiders to the tradition. So, Shaunaka is also an insider. He's a very wise person. Although he's in the position of asking questions, he's asking questions to Suta Goswami. He himself knows. So he is aware of Kapila Muni. And because he is aware of Kapila Muni, so he is asking, he is stating Kapila Muni's purpose in coming. And he says, Atma Pragyaptaye Nrunam. Kapila descended to Atma Pragyaptaye, to give knowledge for the spiritual elevation, to share spiritual knowledge, to illuminate the spiritual dimension of life. So this is the context. Now let's move to the second part. What was I? Anyone remembers? The implication. So what is going on in the discussion? Let's try to look at that. So for us, when this discussion goes on, there are two distinct points in the verse which we discussed, which we will look at over time. So the first thing that is said over here is that Bhagwan Atmamaya, the Lord comes by his own potency, and there is a paradox mentioned over there. He is Ajaha and he is Jataha. Ajaha means he is unborn, and Jataha means he is born. So what does it mean? It is suppose that in logic there are two things. There is contradiction and there is paradox. Contradiction are where two things are opposite. Paradox is two things are seemingly opposite. So that if we get a deeper insight, then we understand that they are not actually opposite. So this is a paradox, that the Lord is unborn and he takes birth. The same paradox comes in the Bhagavad Gita also. In 4.9, Arjuna says, Krishna tells Arjuna that Janma karma chame divyam. So Krishna uses the word Janma. But just 3 verses before that, in 4.6, he says, Ajo pisan avyayatma. So he also uses the word Ajo, which Ajaha. Same words are used there also. So it's Jataha and Aja. So what is the implication? That the Lord is not born like all of us. The Lord is existing in His manifestation outside the time domain, and He simply descends in the time domain. So the difference is, if we consider, if this is the world we live in, and in this world, in the time domain, a baby is small, and the baby grows up, and then we become adults. So like that the journey goes on. But in the case of the Lord is existing in the spiritual domain, and He simply enters into the material domain. Now sometimes He may also, as a Leela, grow from the level of a child to an adult. Sometimes He does not. Lord Narasimhadev has no childhood. Lord Narasimhadev appears in a full fierce form, ready to fight. Similarly, Lord Vamana, many of the other avatars that are there, they don't have any childhood that is described. Now, some avatars, they come and there is a more multifarious reciprocation of Leela. But with respect to Krishna, He has very loving childhood pastimes, but before that itself, when He appears, first He appears in a effulgent four-handed form. And that's why His parents, most parents pray for their child. But in the case of Krishna, His parents pray to the child, because their child is God. So that is a categorical difference. So the implication is, by using this word, is that most people have to, in their journey of life, go and grow from ignorance to knowledge. We are all born ignorant, and as we grow, our parents, our culture, our educational system, and ultimately the spiritual traditions, they give us knowledge. But the Lord, He comes with full knowledge. And that's how Atma Pragyaptaye Indranam. That Lord who is coming out, He is coming to share spiritual knowledge. So the implication is that by using this particular phrase, Ajaha and Jataha, that Lord who is Ajaha, Ajaha is unborn. The Lord who is Ajaha, He becomes Jataha. He becomes born. So why does that happen? That unborn Lord appears to share spiritual knowledge with us. And when He appears, it is not that He has to learn anything. He already knows everything, because He exists outside the time domain, and He comes into the time domain, into this mortal world, for sharing spiritual knowledge with us. And Prabhupada emphasizes the point of Nrunam. Nrunam means human beings, and Prabhupada contrasts them with animals. And he says, we humans are differentiated from animals. And how are we differentiated? We will look at that as we move forward. So this is the implication. The Lord comes to give spiritual knowledge. So now, when we use the word Atma Pragyaptaye, or spiritual knowledge, so most people may feel that spiritual knowledge, okay, it's something which is not really necessary. If you are interested, you can take it. Now, for most people, their vision of spiritual knowledge, it's like in college, if you go and study some subjects, then there are some subjects, if you are studying a course, they are mandatory. And some subjects are electives. If you want, you can have it. So, or if you are having a meal, I want a certain meal, but there are some things which are extras. Okay, if you want, you can have it. For most people, they think spiritual knowledge is just a matter of interest, preference, and if you want, you can have it. But most people, they don't pursue it primarily. And that's why what spiritual knowledge is important to understand. So, Srila Prabhupada talks about it in the 3 modes, and I will explore that. But we'll start with one framework over here. See, for living, we need broadly 2 things. We need means, and we need meaning. We need means for living, and we need meaning for living. Now, means for living means, at a basic level, we can say we need food. Without that, we can't survive. Now, we need money. Now, can money provide happiness? Yeah, only people who have a lot of money can say that money doesn't provide happiness, isn't it? So, money is required. The Shastras call this as artha. Artha means that which has value. It is essential. So, if somebody is starving and they don't have the money to buy food and somehow they get the money, that will provide happiness. If somebody is in lot of pain and they get the money by which they can buy medicines, it can provide happiness. So the question is not whether the means are important or not. They are important. But then what kind of happiness are they providing? So we need means for living, but what differentiates us humans from animals is that when we talk about living, for humans, we need both means and meaning. Means are about how to live. What all will I need for living and how do I get that? But meaning is about why to live. If we separate this from animals, as contrasted with humans, if we consider animals, for them it is only the means that are important. It's not that animals seek any meaning in life. Now, that does not mean their life is meaningless. Their life also has meaning in the sense that through animal lives, soul evolves to the human form eventually. So everybody's existence is meaningful. But the animals don't seek consciously meaning in life. So now this point, I'll just elaborate a little bit, means and meaning. See, means is what I need to survive. And that everybody has, we could say broadly, the means are common for everyone. We need food, we need clothing, we need shelter. So we could say means are common. Now with respect to meaning, what do I need for living? That is means. Now meaning is what makes my life worth living. What makes my life worth living? So this is a categorically different question. And if we consider a 4-quadrant framework where there are means and there is meaning. So means are present, that will be the right side of the x-axis. Means are absent is the left side of the x-axis. The meaning is present at the top of the y-axis, and meaning is absent is the bottom of the y-axis. So now based on this, we could have 4 quadrants starting from the right bottom and going clockwise. Now a person can have means but no meaning. A person can have neither means nor meaning. A person can have meaning but no means. And a person can have means as well as meaning. So now if we say that a person has means, and among these 4 quadrants, intuitively, which do you think is the best quadrant to be in? 4th, isn't it? That I have what I need for living, but I also have something that makes my life worth living. This is the best situation to be in. Now, which do you think is the worst situation? 2, okay. How many of you say 2? Okay. Okay. 3. How many of you say 3? Okay, thank you. Anything else? Now only 1 remains. Isn't it? 1. Yeah, so actually all 3 are bad. But we could say, see what happens is, now it's in one sense, we all have problems in life. Now, which problems or which pain is the worst? If somebody has a leg fracture, somebody has a tooth to be removed, somebody has had a heart attack. Now, which pain is the worst? The fact is that whichever pain we are going through right now feels the worst. Isn't it? That is the nature of the psychology, that we feel like that. So, in any of the quadrants we might be, we will feel pain. But there is a difference. Now, all three are right in the sense that all three are problematic. See, with respect to if the means are absent and meaning is absent. Now, we could say this is the worst in terms of it's visibly the worst. Because a person is starving and that person is maybe living homeless and is all alone and nobody cares for them. They don't have any spiritual side. They just take drugs and somehow they survive, and they take drugs and they want to take overdose and die. It's just terrible. So if somebody has neither means nor meaning, that is the worst, no doubt. Now, however, if at least when somebody doesn't have means, there is a certain level of public sympathy and support for that person. If somebody is starving, then anybody who has a little humanitarian instinct, a basic kindness, they will want to help that person. But what happens is, a person who has means but no meaning, that is actually in one sense the worst, because it's invisible. Person may seem to be very comfortable. Okay, you got a good education, you have a good job, you are living in a nice house, you have a family around you. But somehow, if all of these start feeling pointless, from the public's perspective, everything is fine in your life. What's wrong? Some people may say, you're just complaining, you're just dissatisfied. Don't be so pessimistic. So often, that person may not get much sympathy or support, because what's wrong in your life? So in that sense, this could be much more problematic. Now, I live in India, and from there I travel across the world. So, broadly speaking, poverty is there all over the world. But the poverty in India as compared to the poverty in the Western world, the poverty itself is so different that I was telling, and I first went to America in 2014-15, and I came back to India. And I was talking with people in the Western world. Now, I don't want to stereotype, but quite often if a person has to live in their car, oh, you're homeless. Now, you're living in your car, that's considered a sign of poverty. But India, having a car is a sign of great wealth. So now, of course, living in a car is difficult, but the definition is quite different. So my point is that in India, there are many people whom I have seen at this level. But much of the West, and of course westernized India, I'm not putting India in an exceptional category. India also has, where a lot of people are depressed. A lot of people are suffering from an existential sense of meaninglessness in life. Now this is very difficult to live. So externally the Western world seems very prosperous, flourishing. But there is a crisis of meaning over there. Now, if we have meaning but no means, then it's frustrating. I want to do something. I want to live and take care of my family, but I just don't have the money. I want to share spiritual knowledge, but I want to distribute books. I don't have a bus. I want to preach, but we don't have funds for a temple, or whatever it is. A person they find meaning in life. There it is frustrating, but it is still bearable. So, ideally speaking, what we want to do is, from whichever quadrant we are in, we would like to go to quadrant 4. That where we have means for living and we have the meaning for living. Now, after having made this particular framework, I'll now slightly nuance it, and that's where I will conclude this session. We'll have a few question answers. I'll continue tomorrow. The Prabhupada makes an interesting point in the purport that human life is meant to be regulated life. And he says animals are regulated by nature, but humans need to be regulated by culture. Culture means society. So that's a key difference. Animals and humans. So regulation is needed in society. So animals, the regulation comes by nature itself. That means if an animal is hungry, they find some prey, they eat that prey. But once they have eaten their fill, they will move on. Generally, animals don't suffer from chronic obesity or something like that. So, now humans, often we need to be regulated by culture. And if the culture does not regulate, then it can be a problem. Now, when I say culture, it can vary. Humans always have some level of regulation. But the point is that why is this what does this regulation mean in this context? See, for us, as I said, we need means and we need meaning. Now, are all these two necessarily separate? Well, not necessarily. For somebody who is poor, who has lived a lot of poverty, for that person, earning money itself may give some meaning for them. I have this much savings in my bank. This save, or I'm living in this kind of house. I have this kind of security because of my finances. That itself may give a sense of meaning for their life. So in that sense, means and meaning don't have to completely be distinct. Sometimes, if we consider the means and the meaning, they can overlap. So, for example, as I said, eating food is necessary. It's a means for living. But when we cook food, if somebody gets a sense of meaning in cooking food, I take care of my family, I support my community, somebody cooks for the purpose of charity. So means can also be a source of meaning. In that sense, it's not completely black and white. However, the tendency is that if we seek to find meaning only in the means, then soon it starts becoming meaningless. Isn't it? So, I'll explain this, that what it means. We have all heard this word, artha. Artha, as I said, a more familiar word for us is anartha. Anartha. Now, if you forget everything from this class, you could just remember this one thing. See, there is artha, and what the Vedic tradition says is there is paramartha. Paramartha is the supreme meaning. So there is a hierarchy of meaning, and this point I'll discuss in tomorrow's session more. That there are many sources of meaning we can have in our life, and the topmost source of meaning is Krishna. Param Artha. Param Artha is the supreme meaning. So all of these are Artha. So Artha is, we can get meaning by earning money, we can get meaning by cooking food, we can get meaning by becoming accepted in a particular group, becoming respectable or famous. All those can be sources of meaning. But there are higher and higher sources of meaning. Sociologists, psychologists have also talked about something like Maslow's hierarchy of meaning or needs or whatever. We won't go into that, but there's a hierarchy. And we'll explore this concept of hierarchy tomorrow. But at this point, the thing is that, so means are artha. Now, meaning is not necessarily paramartha, but we'll discuss this. So, but the problem is, whenever any artha becomes the paramartha for us, that leads to anartha. Whenever any artha, for example, money becomes the supreme purpose. Money is important, paramartha means supreme purpose. When money becomes the supreme purpose, it leads to greed. Now, we all need a certain level of respect. We cannot live in a place where we're constantly disrespected or mocked or criticized. So respect is necessary for all of us. But again, when respect becomes the supreme purpose, that leads to ego. We all need a certain level of control in our life. Right now, I am giving this class. So, there's a certain level of control required. The sound system needs to be working. The setting needs to be peaceful. And suppose somebody starts crying, baby is here and the baby starts crying. Now, I would like the context to be peaceful so that the class can be understood. But if a baby starts crying and I start screaming at the mother, no matter how good the class may be, at the end of the class, the audience will not remember the class, they will only remember how I screamed. Isn't it? Now, control is important, but when control becomes the supreme purpose, that leads to anger. So, like that, what happens is, the anartha is where, so the male-female attraction is natural. And that leads to reproduction, that leads to pair bonding, that can lead to close relationships. But when that becomes the supreme purpose, then that becomes lust, and that can become not only disruptive, but destructive. So, the irony, or even the tragedy we could say, is that when the means become too easily available and too abundantly available, then people start thinking that in getting the means itself, I will find meaning in life. And that makes their life meaningless. That somebody, either for them wealth is very easily available, and he just keeps seeking wealth more and more and more. I think, and after some time, okay, the wealth, what is the point of it all? We grow in a very sexualized society, we live in a very sexualized society. So for young people, being sexually attractive is very important. Otherwise they feel, I don't have any self-worth. But somebody may be like that. Somebody may be very attractive and somebody say, I have so many sexual conquests under my belt. But after that, it just becomes completely meaningless. That it is, whatever it is that becomes the paramartha for us. If we seek too much meaning in any one thing, and we do not move towards Krishna as the supreme source of meaning, we start seeking too much meaning in one thing, and then that itself will lead to anartha for us. That will become, so for example, we may have children. A parents taking care of children is the most important responsibility. But if the parents become too attached to the children, then my child is important and definitely should be important. But if that itself becomes extremely important, like it happened in the Mahabharata, for Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana became the most important thing. And because of that, he forgot his role as a king. He forgot his duty to his brother's children, his nephews, and to the broader kingdom. And for the sake of his son, he ended up destroying his entire dynasty. So, artha, when it is made, when we become infatuated with it too much, it leads to anartha. So, the takeaway for us is, that simple takeaway we'll finish with today, is that when we are going through life, we need a balance. The balance is that we cannot pursue only, or rather let's put it this way, the balance is that we need to have both artha, that is means, and we need paramartha. That is what will give us meaning in our life. Now how exactly Krishna as the paramartha will give meaning, that we'll discuss tomorrow. But if artha becomes the paramartha, that will lead to anartha. So we all can see in our lives what is it that presently gives us meaning, and how sometimes the very thing that gives us meaning, gives life our meaning, can destroy meaning in other areas of our life and ultimately leave our life meaningless. So we try to ensure that no artha becomes the paramartha, that it is Krishna who remains the paramartha. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. I talked about how spiritual knowledge, that is our topic, and the search for meaning. So how we We discussed this using the framework of Chit. C was the context. So in the context we discuss, among the 12 cantos, this third canto is among the most philosophical sections. And in these philosophical sections, we have chapter 25 to chapter 32, these 8 chapters. They are discussing the philosophy Atma Pragyaptaye. So we discussed how this is the 4th level conversation. Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj, Sutta Goswami and the sages are Nimisharanya, then Vidura and Maitreya, and then this is where now Kapila and Devahuti, they are going to discuss. So that particular conversation is beginning, and that's what we are discussing today. In the implication part, I discussed how what differentiates humans from animals is that humans, all living beings, you can say animals and humans, we all need means for living. Nobody can live without these means. Means are basically what we need for living. How do we get that? What we need for living is the means. And we humans need that, animals need that. But humans need something fundamentally more, and that is meaning. Meaning is what makes life worth living. So, ideally speaking, the best life is where both are present. Animals don't need this, humans need this. And then we discuss this 4 quadrant of whether means are present and meaning is present. And the best is where both are present. And the worst is, with the visibly the worst is where neither are present. Invisibly the worst is where meaning is absent even if means are present. So broadly, in the materially progressed West, this is the situation. In the poorer parts of the world, like in India, this may be the situation. Now, of course, it's not necessary that all Indians are here, all Westerns are there. I'm just general broad understanding. But we don't have to be situated in one quadrant. We all can move towards a higher quadrant. And then we discussed about how Artha has a hierarchy. That there are many Arthas, many sources of meaning. And among them there is the Paramartha, the supreme Artha. Supreme source of meaning is Krishna. So these two, means and meaning, need not be completely separate. Sometimes in just getting the means can be a source of meaning for someone. How much money I have, how much food I have. But the problem is when Artha becomes the Paramartha. When any means for living becomes the meaning for living, that will lead to Anartha. And how to ensure that we keep Krishna as our Paramartha, that we'll discuss in tomorrow's session. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Is there any quick question or comment? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much for your class. So as we know, Srimad Bhagavatam presented just at the beginning of Kali Yuga, and Kali Yuga, Yuga Dharma being Harinam Sankirtan. But what you're presenting, like Kapila Muni, he's presenting Sankhya Yoga in Satya Yuga. And it's such a large portion of Srimad Bhagavatam. So I'm just wondering how to understand, because Sankhya Yoga would seem it's like a big gown sort of contact there, which is perhaps beyond the intellectual understanding of people in Kali Yuga. So the question is why perhaps Sankhya Yoga is such a large portion of Bhagavatam.
Yeah. So why, if Kali Yuga Harinam Sankirtan is the recommended way, is so much energy and time in the Bhagavatam devoted to Sankhya? I'll talk from two distinct perspectives. See, the first is, when we say Harinam Sankirtan, now we need to understand what is Harinam Sankirtan. We could expand the definition. It could be singing, but it can also be glorification of the Lord. in his final days, Srila Prabhupada was, when he was in Vrindavan, he was focusing a lot on encouraging scientific outreach. So that's Prabhupada's scientist disciple, Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj. And he and Prabhupada would be having discussions. So Prabhupada would get very excited, but Tamal Krishna Maharaj would feel a little concerned that Prabhupada might get too exhausted. And then after they would have some discussion, Prabhupada would ask, he would ask Prabhupada, Prabhupada, would you like to have some kirtan now? So one day Prabhupada just spoke to him. What do you think? We are not having kirtan right now? This is also kirtan. So any way the Lord is glorified, that is Harinam Sankirtan. So that is a very inclusive, expansive definition. So Sankhya is also philosophical analysis through which the Lord is glorified. That's one way of looking at it. Now another way is, when we say for Kali Yuga, Harinam is the way. Now what does this mean? See, there will always be different kinds of people throughout human society. Even in Kali Yuga, there are intellectual people. And is it that even intellectuals have to be forced to sing and not do anything else? If we mandate that way only, then most intellectual people will never connect with our tradition. No, Prabhupada himself said that bhakti is very easy, just chant and be happy. But don't think we are sentimentalists. If you want to study philosophy, we have so many books. So, when we say in Kali Yuga, Harinam is the way, what it means is that in Kali Yuga, because for most people, their cognitive and spiritual and philosophical capacities are lesser, so Harinam is provided as the way. But that does not mean nothing else matters. Why did Prabhupada have the Bhagavatam class every day? Why did Prabhupada write Bhagavatam commentaries? So Sankhya is actually quite deep analysis of material nature. And while the perspectives and the specific insights from those perspectives are quite different from modern science, but the principle is very similar. The principle is that we dive deep into the analysis of material nature. So broadly in the Bhagavatam, it is Parikshit Maharaj, when he is hearing, he is simply interested in remembering Krishna. Now remembrance of Krishna or Krishna consciousness can come in two ways. One is we bring Krishna into our consciousness. And this is done broadly through Leela. So we hear about Krishna, we sing about Krishna, we bring Krishna into our consciousness. That is one way. But the other way is bring what is in our consciousness to Krishna. Bring what is in our consciousness to Krishna. So what does this mean? That, say, if somebody has had previously a lot of interest in science, do they have to reject science to turn towards Krishna? No, they can connect their science to Krishna. So Parikshit Maharaj is a very well-educated person. He was a Rajarishi. So Parikshit Maharaj knew about Sankhya. Parikshit Maharaj knew about the cosmology that comes in the 5th canto. This comes in 3rd canto. But what he wanted to know is, these bodies of knowledge that I have, can they be connected with Krishna? Because that's something which is already there in my mind. See, there are some things in our consciousness which just have to be removed. If there is something which is grossly sensual, grossly tamasic, that has to be removed. But there may be sattvic things. Somebody has a love for nature. Now, when we come over here, this atmosphere is so serene, so sattvic, so sublime actually. Now somebody has a lot of interest in nature. They can just look at nature, the beauty of nature. But that can be spiritualized. So you don't have to take it out of your consciousness. So most of the 10th canto largely, the 10th canto, but the 7th canto, Parikshit Prahlad Maharaj Leela and other Leelas, they are taking the approach of bring Krishna into our consciousness. The 3rd canto, the 5th canto, to some extent the 11th canto, Uddhav Gita, they take the approach of bring what is in our consciousness to Krishna. So now this approach is not necessary for everyone, but the principle is illustrated. So for somebody who didn't have much interest in science, they don't have to study science to become Krishna conscious. So somebody who does not have much interest in Sankhya, we can read those sections, we don't have to go into the technicalities. So if you see Prabhupada's purports in the 5th canto Bhagavatam Cosmology also, he doesn't go too much into the technicalities of the cosmography. He focuses on the spiritual principles in his purports. So both ways are there for being Krishna conscious. Okay, thank you. There's a question here, somebody here? Okay. So, thank you very much. Granthraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki, Itai Gaur Premanande. So tomorrow I'll discuss about how Krishna is the Paramartha and how we can have the balance of Artha and Paramartha in our lives. Of means and meaning together, and how Krishna is the source of the supreme meaning. Hare Krishna.